custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to the land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that may be joining us today. So just to give a bit of background on what this webinar is aiming to achieve. So the last few years at the Floodplain Management Australia conference, we've had this Young Floodplain Manager of the Year award, and we've had our three winners, so Tim, Erin, and Isabelle. And we really just wanted to give them an opportunity to talk about their career, sort of how that's progressed, some things they're really proud of, maybe some challenges, and just basically provide advice to up and coming floodplain managers. And just sort of hear sort of what they have to say. As part of this, we're going to do a breakout session that'll be led by our Queensland YFM committee members. So we've got Fraser, Matthew, and Gillian on the call today. And then we'll come back for a Q&A session where we can open the floor and ask our YFM of the Year winners, any questions that we have about career progression or anything like that. So I guess, let's get started. So our first presenter today is Tim, and I will not, I won't introduce him because I'll let him, talk all about his career and that in his presentation. So thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Katrina, and thanks everyone for coming and the YFM for organising this. I'll just try and share my screen. Is that showing up?
Yep, that's working.
Cool. All right. My name's Tim Morrison. I think a lot of people know me as the rural flood guy because most of my career has been spent working on rural floodplains in Western New South Wales. This image just shows a really good example of the type of environment that I'm used to working in. So this is the Bowen-Darling River, and it's sort of showing some floodplain ecological and cultural assets, so First Nations cultural assets. And so the floodplain management planning that we do is really aimed at protecting connectivity to those assets, as well as risk to life and property. The image also shows, I guess, the highway being cut. So in these rural environments, sometimes these rivers come up for many weeks and events last for many months. And access is a big issue, and also showing there some irrigated agriculture, which can have impacts on flood flow paths, and also like this is a large water storage, so floodplain harvesting, so extraction of flood water for irrigation purposes has been a big part of my career as well, and essentially trying to regulate that practice. I guess one thing you'll notice in the picture, there's not a lot of pipes or drainage structures, so don't ask me about those. I'm not very good with that. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I've primarily worked in rural floodplain management and wetlands. I've worked across government, small business, and as a one-man band. And in my current role, I'm at DPD Water. I manage a team of 9 modelers, ecologists and spatial analysts, so it's quite a diverse sort of team. And then a bit about me personally, I did a Bachelor of Engineering, double degree with a Bachelor of Science, so always had a bit of an environmental bent. And then when I graduated, I did a Master's in Spatial Science as well, so remote sensing and spatial analyst type work. I'm no longer a young floodplain manager. I think if the cutoff is still 35 years, I've got 3 young kids and a Sydney mortgage to go with that to add to the stress. This is just showing some images, again, the type of work that I'm used to doing. So these are all from the Macquarie Marshes, which is a pretty iconic wetland, although the first 3 images don't really show much of a wetland. and I'll get into that a bit later. Yeah, so career progression, I've kind of almost sort of stumbled my way through my career. The underlying theme has always been sort of that rural floodplain management. Like I found my niche pretty early on. But yeah, I guess how I got started, I did what's called a year in industry um, student internship at ANSTO, so that's the Nuclear Science Technology Organisation. And I was working on projects that involved isotope hydrology. So looking at one particular project, we'd sample the water from the trees and then and get the isotope extinguisher of that. So basically the ratios of the different isotopes, and then dig a little groundwater bore next to it and look at where extract the water from the groundwater next to the tree and sort of see at what depth the trees were accessing their water. So that was mostly in the Macquarie Marshes and the Guada wetlands. So in that year, I did a lot of field work out to these western sort of wetlands and really fell in love with the landscape and yeah, gained some valuable experience doing that. And I guess another key factor of that is that was during the Millennium Drought, so it was a lot of concern about trees dying that had been there for hundreds of years, and that was sort of the driver for that work. And so following on from that, I actually intended on doing a PhD um, around that sort of wetland hydrology, and my supervisor introduced me to the guys at DHI. So they're the manufacturers or developers of the Mike software, like Mike 11. Young people probably don't know it very well, but you might have had to extract some data from it to build your two-flow model. But yeah, back in the day, that was quite popular. So they had just won a project in the Macquarie Marshes to look at the floodplain ecosystems there, and so they offered me a part-time job, and then my proposed PhD supervisor actually changed jobs to Melbourne. University of Melbourne, and I didn't really want to move to Melbourne, so I took a grad job at DHI. So the time that I was at DHI, the Sydney office shrank from about 10 people down to about 2 people, or was 2 people. So I felt like I wasn't really learning a lot. I guess to their credit, they did actually fly me to Brisbane a fair bit to sit with the senior engineers. I was pretty bored and didn't really enjoy the office culture. So I took a job at a little consulting firm called Molino Stewart, who's now actually part of WaterTech. They got bought out recently. And one of the focuses for Molino Stewart was really looking at, rather than building hydraulic models, they were looking at using the data from hydraulic models for risk assessments and floodplain risk management studies. So that was quite interesting. But then I got a call from the guys that ran the Rural Floodplain Management Program in OEH, and I know a bit of a theme with me is like I sort of can't say no to a challenge. So they offered me a role there as a senior modeler. So I took that and went back to modeling Western floodplain ecosystems. I did that for a few years, and then we sort of completed most of the modeling, and it was getting a bit boring. So I ended up like throughout that whole period, I was still talking to Stephen Molino at Molino Stewart. So I actually did what not many people do. I went back to Molino Stewart for a second time and worked there for a bit. But yeah, look, I wasn't entirely happy with the work that I was doing. It was a bit more Sydney focused, and around the same time, actually, I don't know, people don't really know the story or some of the backstory for water modeling solutions. So Blake Bolton and Monica Balicki, the 2 directors there, I actually worked with them at DHI, and they were starting this new consultancy, and I thought, hey, I can do that too. I'm just as good as them. And so that's why I essentially started my little one-man band, Morrison Water and Spatial. So I did that for a couple of years. I actually found that was a really stressful time because I guess my personal background, my father was a small business owner, and he sort of instilled in me like you always make hay while the sun shines. And I just had too much work, and the sun was shining too much. I didn't know how to say no to work. So I ended up, I was doing a lot. I was quite stressed out, and being on your own is really hard because you don't have anybody to talk to about your problems and share them with. And then like I was writing these reports, and I was like, well, I don't know if it's any good or not. Like I generally back myself, but I'm not the best writer in the world. So I had concerns about QA as well doing that. There was difficulty hiring people. Nobody really wants to go work for one person. So yeah, I ended up taking on a business partner as a way of trying to solve that problem that I'd created for myself. And it didn't really solve the problems. It sort of just created a bigger, like the same problems, just multiplied. To be honest. So I had a day where I was supposed to be doing field work, and it was supposed to be this really nice day out in the sun. And I think I got calls from about 9 different clients asking me where is my report at or my thing at. And I basically had a bit of a breakdown and burnt out, and I realized, look, this is not working for me. At the time I had sort of young kids as well, and so I was, yeah, just really stressed out. And so essentially I sold my shares in that company to my business partner and started looking for a new job. And so I'd been doing some sub consulting work to catchment simulation solutions. Um, and when they found out that I was looking for a job, we had a chat, and they were sort of keen to pick me up. So yeah, so I went there, and I was there for about 3 years. And then sort of my latest move, I got a phone call from the director of floodplain planning at DP Water, saying that they wanted to set up a new floodplain management team, rural floodplain management team, and basically strongly encouraging me to apply for the role. So that's what I did, and that was about a year ago. So we've gone from a team of myself up to 9, and we're yeah, we've got a big works program, but I won't go into that. I'll just move on quickly. So factors for success. So I guess, yeah, just trying to pass on some supposed wisdom. Like these are the things that I think are important for success. So work on stuff that you care about. So like I said, I've had a pretty big passion for floodplain wetlands, and that really helps me get out of bed and do the work, and not sort of get too I don't think I suffer from Mondayitis, basically, if we put it that way, because I'm quite happy to get into the work and do that. The other thing, I think leaning into challenges has been a big part of my career, and look, I'd strongly encourage everybody to do that, and particularly around presenting your work. Like I sort of think, I was thinking back, like, why did I win that award? And I think that I don't think I've done anything like particularly special, um, uh, but what I have done is that, like, I've always been an advocate for the work. I've always been happy to present it to at project meetings and do FMA papers and things like that. And through that, I've met a lot of people. So I met a lot of people that I think were on the selection committee for the award. So yeah, look, I yeah, encourage people to do as much of that as they can, and then work for people that want to give you those opportunities. So like if you're working for someone that's taking credit for your work and you're not really getting the opportunity to promote yourself outside of your sort of immediate team, then that's not great. But yeah, look, I've been really fortunate. All the people I've worked for have always just said, just go for it. Be open and communicative. Yeah. So again, it's like you're at work 40 hours a week or 35 hours a week, and if you're in the public service, so like you've got to be, you got to make friends and like the people you're working with, and I find just being open is the best way to do that. And try to have some fun. Like again, you're at work for so much. It's sort of, if you're not having fun, then yeah, it's pretty bit of a drag. Some key challenges. So for me, there's been two main ones that when I was sort of asked about this. So stakeholder engagement has been a big challenge. So yeah, talking about flooding during drought to farmers that are struggling on the land, that's been a big one. And then talking to people after a flood as well can be quite difficult. But again, I guess I lean into this because I think that it's a challenge that most engineers have. So if you can do it and you're good at it, then I think it's a good way to progress your career because yeah, it is quite valued. And I guess in the best way to do that is just to be real and show empathy and be outcomes focused. So don't like if you're talking to a farmer, he doesn't care about whether your flood is a 1% or a 2% or a 0.5%. He sort of cares about what the impact is going to be on his crops or livelihood. And then the other one, like I said, burnout. So I guess just to give people advice is just to take care of yourself. Try to learn the warning signs for when you are going to burn out, and learn the things that that can help you prevent it. So like just taking a break or whatever it is that you want to do that can help you with preventing burnout. Yeah, so that's it. I'll move on quickly. I've probably gone over my time, but yeah, thanks everyone for your interests and to the YFM organisers for organising.
Thank you, Tim. That was fantastic. All right, so next we have Erin Hughes, so I will pass over to her. Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, guys. Can you see that?
Yep, that's working.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you to the YFM and everyone who's come today and giving your time up to join this session. So my name is Erin, and really excited to be here today and have a little bit of chat about my career progression and I guess some of the key decisions I made and some of my insights, which hopefully will possibly be of help. So let's see if this is going to move for me. There we go. So unlike Tim, I probably had quite a linear career progression, and when looking back, these are sort of the key stages in my technical career in water that I sort of thought was really influential. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about each of these points and sort of some of the key decisions I've made during this time. But before I go into that, something for me that I thought was really important background that I probably wanted to give to people was a bit about myself and how I grew up. And the reason for that is it's actually been really impactful in terms of the decisions that I've made in my career to date, how I operate as an engineer, and also is the key reason that I have a passion in water. So I'm sure most of those on the call might not know me personally, but I actually come from a really remote community in the Torres Straits. Now, when I say a remote community, for some of the time I grew up on a tiny island that only had a population of 300 people. But the majority of my childhood was actually on commercial crayfishing boats with my family in the middle of the ocean in basically the middle of nowhere. And because of that, I did homeschool. I never actually stepped foot in a classroom until my final years of high school when I basically got forced to. But because of that, I actually never knew what an engineer was, and I didn't actually know what they did until I started my engineering degree, which in a way, it's surprising because when I grew up, I definitely saw the direct impact that engineers and STEM professionals could have on communities, particularly when things were being implemented that weren't designed appropriately for the community or the environment. So my views had a massive impact on my values, and the further I get into my career, the more I realise that. And when I made decisions that don't align or didn't align strongly with my core values, that's when I had issues in my career. And it also caused a number of challenges in my background too. Even though it was fantastic, it gave me this passion for water, it made me want to be an engineer. It also meant that to be an engineer, I had to leave my community and my way of life, which at times was a real juxtaposition to sort of the really hectic life that you can have as an engineer. So when I finished high school, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, but I was quite a practical person and I really wanted a career that would allow me to give something back. So I figured maybe engineering could do that for me. And to be honest, the hardest thing I have ever done in my career to date was finishing my engineering degree. And that is still the hardest thing for me. I'm quite dyslexic, and having to sit through very theoretical lessons that didn't have a lot of relation to the real world was very challenging for me. However, I got through it because during my degree, I was also working as an engineer, even though I wasn't qualified, for a remote regional council. And I was managing a lot of their water and wastewater assets. And that was fantastic because it really reinforced my love for engineering and that realization that, yes, this is the career that I wanted. So I just had to knuckle down and get through this degree to be able to get into the next step. And it also reinforced my love of water and kind of drove me also down to choose that career. While I was at university, it was also the start of, I guess, my passion and interest in humanitarian engineering and international development. I've always had a fascination and a love for international development, and it's a huge passion of mine. However, in my early stages of my career as an undergrad or as a graduate, I actually intentionally never applied for volunteer positions in the development space because I had this very strong view that if I was going to do that, I wanted to have a significant amount of technical experience, because I had the view of coming in, for me as a graduate, it's more of a learning experience for me than I'm actually providing value to these vulnerable communities. So that was a really conscious decision for me. And instead, I decided to volunteer for organisations such as Engineers Without Borders, but focus more on their Australian context. And this was the start of just a huge component of my career today. I'm still an active volunteer with EWB, and I've had opportunities to develop programs that can link university graduates to remote Indigenous communities, provide engineering services as part of a graduate program. I've developed sort of STEM, science, engineering, maths and technology. I said that in the wrong way, but you all get the gist. Programs in remote Indigenous communities, and some of those have now been running for over 9 years and are really successful. And those opportunities and that learning actually also tied into my actual career too. So within all the companies I've worked with, I have developed reconciliation action plans. I've been in committees for developing corporate social responsibility programs. And to date, I also developed and also manage HARC's partnership with WaterAid Australia, where we're donating technical pro bono services annually to some of their international programs. So this is really important to me because it's continually grounded me throughout my career. It's a huge passion for me, so it's allowed me to explore that. But it also continually gives me motivation and a want to get out of bed, sometimes when things are a little bit harder. So it's been really important today. So when I actually graduated from uni, there was that tough decision of what do I actually want to do and where do I want to go? I was really tossing up between sort of industry, government, consulting, and in the end, I decided I wanted to go down the consultancy route. The logic behind that for me anyway was I did this really hard degree and I want the best technical foundation that I can possibly have moving forward as an engineer before I probably do the things I'm more passionate about, which is that sort of the more higher level water strategy. So because of that, and that want for that technical foundation, I decided to take a position with SKM in the surface water team. And I was with SKM, which became Jacobs, for about 6 years, and predominantly very technically focused within the hydraulic and hydrological modelling space. For the first few years, I was heavily involved in flood risk management and doing a lot of work with local communities that were affected by the 2010 and 2011 floods. So really impactful time in my career, and sort of provided the foundations of the type of work that I wanted to do in the future. When we got bought out by Jacobs, that changed quite a bit. We started moving into more design, sort of major infrastructure upgrade designs, and that was predominantly my job. And during this time, I started to experience burnout as well. Around this time, I actually also got offered a scholarship to do a master's in integrated water management. And even though I swore I would never step foot in a uni again, I actually, and I was also experienced quite a bit of burnout, I actually accepted the master's. And people laugh when I say this, but I took it because I needed a break. And I needed a break from the heavy technical work that I was doing in the infrastructure space. And it was exactly what I needed. It gave me the opportunity to engage again in sort of that high level water strategy and really community-based water projects through sort of my final thesis and some of the work I did on social impact assessments for dam upgrades. And this master's just reignited my love for engineering and made me realise that if I wanted to stay in consultancy, I needed to leave the company I was working with and move to a company that was more aligned with my personal values. And therefore, I decided to move, and I ended up joining Hark around 5 years ago now. And I was very lucky when I was at that stage of realising I needed to change roles, in that my specialisation of hydraulic modelling was in high demand in Australia. So I actually was fortunate enough to interview a lot of the companies that I was looking at working for, and I was very picky at choosing somewhere that had similar values to myself, had the type of work I really wanted to be involved in, and was also willing to be flexible and accommodate sort of my career wants and needs, and that particularly tied to my pro bono work that I do. So that's pretty much where I am today. These days, I'm still very technically focused. I mainly sit within the dam risk and flood risk management space. But as well as my technical workload, I have a lot of leadership roles within Hark. I'm currently a team leader and recently took over their regional manager for Queensland role, which has meant that I've actually got to go and develop an office and set up my own team here in Brisbane, which has been very exciting and also quite stressful at times, but it's absolutely fantastic, the amount of diversity that I currently get in my job, and just makes me really excited to come into work. But as well as my day job, I still volunteer a lot, not only with industry bodies, but also within the not-for-profit space. So I'm on the committee for ANCOD, which relates to large dams in Australia. And I'm also an active volunteer donating technical services, not only to Engineers Without Borders, but also WaterAid Australia. That's a little bit about me. Thank you so much for listening.
That was fantastic, Erin. Thank you so much for that. All right, next up we have is Isabelle. Thanks, Isabelle.
Yep, let me start my preso. Okay. We see that.
Yep, that's working.
Fantastic. Cool. So I'm Isabelle Testoni. I'm at Catchment Simulation Solutions as a senior engineer here. I'm also say I'm a bit of a committee junkie, serial committee member, and I might get into that in a bit. Just a quick overview of my career, and then I'll sort of talk about some of the questions I had in my career and how I sort of navigated them through that. I studied civil engineering at UNSW. I actually went into a very general engineering degree and then like specialized in civil engineering. Just trying to keep my options open, you know, wasn't really sure what I really wanted to get into. And in doing civil engineering, I then sort of fell into some internships around water at WMA Water, particularly in my final year. And so I worked part-time in my final year at WMA as a student. During that time, I was very lucky to work on Erin. And, you know, here I've got sort of Australian rainfall runoff guidelines. I worked on the document itself, and I also worked on some of the reports and projects that went into that, particularly temporal patterns was a big one that I worked on. I left WMA in 2018 to go to, at the time was Office Environment and Heritage, and now it's DPE. And then, funny enough, Tim came along and said, oh, you know, we've got some pretty interesting work going on back in the consulting realm at CSS, if you're interested in coming back. And wasn't too interested to begin with. And then he said, oh, you know, we're working on Hawkesbury Nepean. I was like, oh, that does sound pretty interesting. So I jumped ship from the department back into consulting in 2020, and we went straight into a lockdown, which was interesting, joining a new company right around that time. But I'd also already worked on the Hawkesbury Nepean project in some of the early stages at WMA. So I was sort of interested to sort of see how it all went. While I was at DPE as well, OEH, I also helped start the YFM committee in Australia and in New South Wales particularly. So I'll sort of get into that a bit as well. I guess I talked to a few people about, you know, where they're going in their career and what they want out of it. And I guess these are some things that I asked myself, which is, what do I want out of my career? And what I really looked at was like looking at ahead and seeing what path I'd take. And that's sort of looking at what are some other people out there that you know, admire their careers, or you say, that's what I want to be doing. I want to be doing what Tim's doing. How do I get there? You know, that sort of thing. And I think that was really advantageous for me. So I was sort of looking at being like, do I want to be that technical expert, or do I want to be a big project manager? What sort of ways can you get there? You know, and at some point I really wanted some government experience, and that's when I started looking for some government roles in that. And, you know, I sort of knew some people at government and sort of asking them for their day-to-day, you know, what do you do? What is actually when you sit down and you get to work, what is that? What does that look like? So I'd encourage people, if you're looking at, you know, where do you want to go in your career, what does that mean, and having a look at different people. This photo of me is at Hoover Dam, where I did a presentation at a conference over in, it was actually the conference in St. Louis, but I traveled there as part of ARR with Mark and Monique, and yeah, I did a presentation on temporal patterns over there in St. Louis. So that's also like some of those sort of things, presenting research and things like that. Is that something you might want to do? How do you get there? And I guess that sort of goes on to when should you make a move or take on more responsibility? I think a lot of people get to these points in their career where they don't know what they're supposed to be doing or where they're supposed to be going. And I think it's really important to talk about moving companies, but also, you know, what you can do in your own company to sort of work on that. I think a big part of that is advocating for yourself, and that is, you are the person who is responsible for your career. You might have some really great mentors, you might have some really great managers, but it's sort of on you to sort of put your hand up and say, yes, this is what I want to do, or that's not what I want to do, because in the end, they're not mind readers. And well, you know, maybe your managers should be checking in with you always. We're all human, and people miss things, and you really need to advocate for yourself and say what you're interested in, what you want to be doing. In saying that, like, you're just looking for opportunities either within or externally. So, you know, other job opportunities you might be interested in, but internally, you know, if you know your company has won a piece of work, or you're working on a new piece of work and you're like, oh, I want to be the project manager of that, ask about it. And if, you know, your manager says, oh, you're not quite there yet, you know, say, oh, can I, you know, listen in on what you're doing with the management of that project, or how can I help, or all those sort of things. So the opportunities doesn't have to be just externally. But yeah, I guess, and moving on to that, it's sort of like, I really had this in my career when it's looking for those opportunities, working with Erin. It was like a great opportunity, but it was a lot of work. And I think, you know, both Erin and Tim talked about burnout. I think after Erin, I definitely experienced some pretty big burnout. And I think that was part of my move to government, to sort of like get away from that work and do something else and do something different, which really helped. And I think that comes into when do you take that opportunity? When Tim approached me about joining CSS, I was, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to go back to consulting. I did really miss the tech. I do quite like being quite technical, and I did really miss the technical side of it. And it really came down to, it was such a great opportunity. If I was ever going to go back to consulting, that was the time to do it. And that's kind of what I took, as I think it was the right opportunity, because it was a good opportunity for me at the time. And I was really sad to leave the company because I was really enjoying my job there as well. But just because you're enjoying a job doesn't mean, you know, there are other things you can enjoy as well. And, you know, applying for new jobs, within reason, when you're applying for a job, you're letting the employer decide if you're the right fit or not. I think we often exclude ourselves, like, oh, I don't have enough experience, or I'm not sure if I meet all these criteria. Well, it's kind of like their job to decide that. And when I applied for the role in government that I did, working in the floodplain management program, I was really like, I'm not sure if I'm qualified for this. But I was looking at it and I was like, I think I could be. I think I could do all these things that they're talking about. I can't do it right now, but I think, you know, I'm capable of doing this. So I think it's really that sort of like advocating for myself, but also, you know, knowing what that job is. And a big thing on that is, like, I knew some of the people at the government already. And, you know, if you're not sure about some of these things, what their role entails, you can ask. You can call up hiring managers and have a chat about the job and say, oh, like, I think I might be applying for this job, or, you know, and they'll have a chat to you about it if they, you know, want the right person for the job. This photo is me and some of my YFM people who, when we started YFM, and I think it comes a lot to like advocating for yourself, that, you know, to start the YFM itself, it was, I was a bit like, oh, are we going to ruffle the feathers saying we want to start this new thing with the young floodplain managers? But when we went and approached the FMA, they were so excited to have us engaged. And it was really great to see that as well. And moving into that, it's like, how do I get there? Great, all these things. A big thing that I've done is getting involved in your community. So that's like industry, but, you know, whatever communities you have there. So I was very fortunate to get involved with A&R, and I think that gave me a bit of a window into all this, window into the FMA, and having that window into the FMA, and seeing people being involved in that community, it really inspired me to later on start the YFM, because I could see all this connection that wasn't happening, that hopefully we can happen now with the YFM. And I was just lucky to get that opportunity doing A&R. And, you know, getting into the room to get that. So like going to FMA things or being involved, and volunteering, and, you know, Erin's talked about it, but yeah, like putting your hand up again and again, like saying, yes, I'll help out. And sometimes it does take a little while to like put your hand up and say it again, and like, oh, no, I'm still here, I'm still like to help out, because like everyone's busy. And especially in volunteer organizations and volunteering in that, you have a lot of people who flake out on you as well. So if you keep showing up, you know, you get to know these people and you get to know all these things. And that's sort of doing the work, but also like asking your employer, it's okay to like send them an email and say, hey, I want to be involved in this committee. Can you, like, can I do it for 1 hour a week? You know, outline the time commitments to them, because some employees balk at like, oh, be involved in committee, you'll disappear for months or something. Like, it's not that. And be like realistic with that. I'm definitely involved in way too many committees, but you know, CSS is great at supporting me do that, and it's not really in the end a lot of time and money to support that. Very briefly, I'll just sort of say, you know, if people are thinking what's next, what do they want? I think, and you know, I think Tim sort of mentioned this as well, but like, what do you want out of your career? Where do you like your career, and what do you want out of life? Like, what do you want to be doing? But a big one of it for me is being honest with yourself and sort of saying like, oh yeah, you know, maybe I'm not a technical person and I want to be a project management. You know, if that's not for me, if I don't enjoy that part of it, then I can do something else. And I think this also goes to a lot of people ask about, you know, diversifying or specializing, and I definitely went down the specializing route. And for me, that was because I just really enjoyed what I was doing, and I kept doing it, kept enjoying it, so I kept doing it. But if you're doing a lot of specializing and you're not enjoying it, you don't have to specialize. You can diversify. Like, it's, I think about where you come, like what you enjoy, but I wouldn't say be scared about specializing if that's what you're enjoying doing. So that's sort of my bit of a pitch and I guess recommendation, or I don't know, advice I had from my career. And just to finish off, these are all the committees that I've been involved in. Probably not exhaustive, but you know, I was involved in the Exotic Beer Society, started that at university, Civil Engineering Society, my Sydney Roller Derby League. I've been the treasurer. I helped start the Young Floodplain Managers Committee and been involved in Pride in Water Working Group, and still involved in the Inter-Engineer, which is a pride group for Engineers Australia, and Inner West Roller Derby as well. And I think all these like extracurricular activities sometimes we dismiss, but they really help know how to navigate everything, and you can use that experience. So, you know, starting the YFM, I already had a experience in running committees. I'd already been treasurer for a not-for-profit. You know, I'm not scared about doing any of that work. And I have to say, out of all the committees I've been involved in, the one I get questions on the most is probably the Exotic Beer Society from university. Everyone asks about, oh, well, what's that one? And, you know, it just opens up everyone. Yeah, those extracurricular things can really help you in your career and what you're looking for as well. But that's my little spiel. I'll hand it off to Katrina again.
Awesome. Thanks, Isabelle. Some great presentations there. We're going to break out into breakout rooms, and basically we want you guys to think of some questions. Our YFM committee members will write them down, and then we'll come back. And we probably only have time for a few questions, but we might aim to come back at about 12:55 or so. So only a few minutes to think about questions. So yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for jumping back in. We've got a fair few questions there ready to go. So I might start with, we're probably going to run a little bit over time, but I'll try to finish up at least, you know, not go too much over time. So this is for all of the panel members. So you all touched on working on things that you either are really passionate about, or, you know, doing work that's very much around your values and your sort of personal value sets. What advice would you have for someone who either feels like the work that they're doing isn't stimulating, or maybe it doesn't align with their current value set, or potentially, you know, they're just looking for, how do you find that that piece of work that, you know, you're really passionate about or yeah, you want to see progress. So maybe we start with Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Katrina. That's a good question. I think I'm pretty fortunate that like I had really good teachers. Like in particular, I had a geography teacher that sort of ignited my passion for the environment and that kind of thing. So I guess I've never had to grapple with what I'll like that sort of thing. But to go back to if you're working on stuff that you're not passionate about, I think like that will always happen. You can't always be doing your dream project. But I think Isabelle's advice was really good about talking to the seniors in your organisation to try to move into things that you are more passionate about or interested in. Or like one thing I'd find I have no interest in flood impact assessments, for example. Like that to me, that's like just boring work. Other people might love it, but like when I was doing those to get motivated, I'd put myself in the shoes of the people that were actually like gonna live in this place or use this piece of infrastructure and sort of like try to use that as a motivator, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Maybe Isabelle?
Yeah, I think to add to that a bit, it's hard if your work's not stimulating. Like I think you know, you can also go to your superiors and managers and ask a bit about that. But I also think you don't always have to be passionate about work. Like there's other things in life that you can be passionate about and you can put your time into. But if you're looking for that, I mean, what I've done in my career is join committees, like started committees and sort of look for that connection in other ways. But you don't always have to be super passionate about everything you do at work. And, you know, it can just be a 9 to 5 job that you turn up, you do a good job and you head home. Like sometimes that's what it is. And that's okay as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Isabelle. Erin?
Oh, I think Tim and Isabelle smashed some of those great points. Yeah, and totally agree. You don't have to be over the moon and passionate about every single thing you do in your job. Really agree with that. I think if you're disinterested, definitely try new things, give different things a go and find the aspects, even when something's not stimulating or you might not like it. Figure out what you don't like about it and the aspects you do like, and that can really help inform the types of work you try and target or move into if you do want to try and create that passion. Definitely talk to people. The other component for me anyway that personally helped, and this also ties back to you don't always have to be passionate about your job, but understanding giving yourself space to understand what your values are. That's very easy to say. It is very hard, and it took me a long time, and they change. They still change today about what they are, what my core values are. But looking at what your core values are personally, what your values are with your career, but also your relationships. And they can be different, they can be very similar, but I think that can really help you understand what and how you invest in things and what you move down towards. For me anyway, it's been very helpful, but that's been a very big journey, a long process, and trying things out that completely went against my values, but I didn't realize that till later. But
I think
that's a wonderful thing.
I think that's really important because you sort of, it's almost this very similar things of finding your own values, but then also expressing that of why you don't find this work interesting. And it's hard to go to your managers and say, I don't want to do this work if you can't say why, or you can't say what work you would like to do. So yeah, it's a really good point of finding your own values and working out what they are so you can then work out what you like and don't like.
Yeah, because it'll never be the same. Everyone's slightly different. You'll have a different reason for something. And it's, you don't all have to go down a certain path.
That's fantastic. Thank you all. A few specific questions about how to get involved in the YFM or even just Engineers Without Borders or other volunteer organisations. I think we've got a bit of interest in that. So for young professionals wanting to do that, how would they start?
Isabelle, I'm going to dump that to you first. You're YFM rep, so.
I'd say, like reaching out to people. it's always good. There's normally like generic emails you can send to. That's great, but I think reaching out to someone personally, if someone you know on the committee, or you can even LinkedIn stalk someone and send them a message, because like people are in these volunteer groups are normally pretty busy, and they're normally, just things slip through the cracks as well. So like, and I would say don't worry about pestering them if you like message a couple of times, because like things just do slip through the cracks. But yeah, messaging, and also just, you can even just start the conversation of like, oh, is there something I can do? Is there something I can help out with? Yeah, so I definitely think that. I'm not sure about Engineers Without Borders per se, but I would imagine they're probably pretty similar in terms of the same issues of volunteer groups.
Yeah, it's a volunteer organisation. Online, there might be applications for different roles. Apply. Totally agree with Isabelle points. The only other one I have is turn up to events. Turn up to events. Say hello. Get your face in there. And the more you can show, particularly as a volunteer, that you are willing to donate your time and be committed, that is one of the most important things, because it will drive you up the wall in any committee or any volunteer group if someone says, yeah, I can do that, and then they don't turn up again. It is one of the hardest things to deal with. So if you just turn up, show your face, show commitment, you will get more than enough opportunities that you probably need to be careful about what you say yes to.
Awesome. Thank you. That probably brings us to, I guess, the next question, which is, because you all have a lot going on with committees, the volunteering work generally, business owning. What advice would you have for young professionals to avoid or be conscious of burnout before it happens? What lessons did you take away from burnout that might be valuable to young professionals? Maybe Tim, did you want to?
Yeah, I think probably I think you almost need to go through it once to recognize it. But like I think there's always going to be telltale signs, like the way that you conduct yourself and you do your work, the way you talk to people, your loved ones, that kind of thing. You will start to recognize sort of when these things are creeping up on you, and I think you've got to find what it is that's going to kind of de-escalate that for yourself. Like for me, being out in nature is an important one. Just even the fact like of recognizing, hey, I'm being a bit of a dickhead here, this is creeping up on me, like just recognizing it can be like can work to reduce it, and sort of like, all right, well, I need to change course. And yeah, I'm sure Erin and Isabelle have better ways of explaining that without swearing, but
Probably not.
Erin, did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I really agree with Tim's comment. It's all well and good to hear about it, but even though you can be very aware, you sometimes just have to experience it and get to that point to understand what it is for you, because everyone is different. How you experience burnout, when you will experience burnout, and what the limit is for you. And that will change. That will change over time as you develop as a person and what you are wanting to take on it, and your ability to take on capacity and your ability not to take on. You could burn out and get to a point and go, I cannot join another committee again in my rest of my life. And that is okay. That is totally fine how you experience that. I think my suggestion is it's okay to experience that. Nearly everyone will at some point in their career. Whether they say they do or not, everyone will. It just might manifest slightly differently. Once you start feeling that, learn the signs, learn what it is for you. And be kind to yourself. Like Tim said, find something that grounds you, find something that allows you to step away and actually give yourself the space to go, oh crap, I was a dick. Or yeah, I'm not functioning right now. Why am I not functioning when I should be? So yeah, be kind to yourself. You sometimes can't stop it, but when you give yourself the space, if you can, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but if you can actually figure out what is the main reason why it's the underlying reason as to why you're feeling this, then it's the first step, I think, to helping you change what is causing it, why this is happening, and changing those either both behaviours personally, or if you are in a situation that has nothing to do with your behaviour, leave, and that is okay.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Erin. Isabelle, did you want to add anything else?
Not too much. I think we're probably all sort of I think my sort of burnout I didn't realize until years later. Then I was like, oh, there's probably a bit of burnout I had around there. I think also like I had sort of burnout specifically, I think around Erin. It's a really big push and doing like 80-hour weeks to try and get it out and doing a lot of stuff. So that was quite significant. And then after that, it was a bit hard. I think these days I'm a lot more mindful around some of those things. And I actually like there was this thing I did at the department. We had this, like away day that you sort of working through change or something like that. And one of the advice they had was, take those deep breaths. But one of the ones was saying, take a deep breath and then ask yourself, what is the most important thing in this moment? And I really do that a lot. And I think that really helps me put in perspective work and puts me in perspective, like my health and all that sort of stuff, to be like, what is the most important thing? Is it that report's going to be a day late? No, that is not important to me right now. I'm going to go home and, spend some time with my daughter, that sort of thing. That something of putting that burnout in perspective, because work isn't really the most important thing in my life.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. We're almost 10 minutes over time, so apologies for that, everyone, but appreciate that a few people have stayed. So our panel members have actually said if you have some additional questions, feel free to maybe just send them through to the YFM LinkedIn page, just send a message and we can pass them on to the panel members. They're happy to answer any additional questions. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to say thank you so much, Isabelle, Erin and Tim. I found that fantastic. Yeah, sort of reminded me also why I became an engineer as well, listening to a few of those presentations. Yeah, so this will be recorded, so please share amongst your networks as well. So thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone for
Thanks for
coming.
organizing.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.